What's the treat for you? I know a lot of you people just had your hearts sink to the bottom of your stomachs in seeing me solo in frame, but we got a special treat for you here on this special Wednesday. Pete and D Money, hop in right now. D Money luxuriating at an undisclosed location. We appreciate you chiming in here, D Money. We're gonna go kind of like staccato a little bit. We're not exactly gonna be playing jazz today because I got a funky return situation here. But yesterday was media day, and we actually finally have stuff to react to. I'll lean on Pete first. You and I were dialed in. Now, Pete, you've been known to be a skeptic of some of these quarterbacks we've brought in the past. You like to read the tea leaves. You like to vibe check. You like to see the surrounding team around the quarterback, not the personnel on the field, but the people that the quarterback off the field surrounds himself with. We'll be truthful to the audience. You had your concerns about Cam Ward and his reputation. He obviously erased all of those with his play and his approach to the game. Carson Beck comes in. A lot of people have made up their mind about his character. I think Carson Beck yesterday, a media day, was a real bright spot for the University of Miami. And I think if you had certain concerns and if you had formulated an opinion on the young man, maybe he swayed some people. Pete, your takeaway from Carson Beck and his very impressive media day.
Yeah, Mike, I thought it was a good outing for him. It was really his first obviously opportunity to not only talk to Miami media, but any media in general since he had been at Miami. I think there were some people kind of questioning whether or not they'd actually send him out there. But to me, it was a no-brainer. And I thought he handled himself very, very well. I thought the answers that he gave, especially to a lot of the different questions, spun the different ways that they were about following up Cam Ward. That to me was like the question he was getting, time and time again. And I think he answered it well about every time that he was asked that question. And now it just becomes seeing him out there on the field. I gotta say, man, we've had a lot of people in our inner circles, Chance Mack, starting conspiracy theories about his status and stuff like that. And I think that everyone needs to calm down. And yes, Mario and the way he operates is he doesn't really give you much in terms of the player's health. He's not going to give you the full story, let's say. And I don't think that coaches across the country really ever give the full story. I don't think this is a Mario only thing, but you've put a lot of eggs into this basket of Carson Beck. I'm not even talking money-wise. I'm talking about how you've built out this roster quarterback-wise. So I just don't think they would have done that if they didn't feel that. And this isn't a feelings thing. This is from what they've seen also. I don't think they would have operated the way they would have if they didn't have concrete or feel like they had concrete evidence that this could work.
D Money, we'll kick it over to you. One of the things that I was really interested in hearing is Carson Beck expound on his relationship with that locker room. This is a guy that came over from Georgia, and the reputation was as soon as he went out with injury, the quarterback that's replacing him in Gunner, that's the guy that the team is going to rally around. And we got conflicting reports on how Carson was viewed inside of that Georgia locker room. I think a lot of what I was concerned about got put to rest pretty easily by what Carson said. What was your takeaway from his really impressive appearance at ACC Media Day, D Money?
First of all, good to see you guys. Yeah, I'm not in an undisclosed location. I'm in Denver, Colorado, right? So we were headed to Rocky Mountain National Park. So before that, my son wanted to go to a Rockies game. So we're in Denver. Downtown Denver, not great. I mean, Miami downtown is not the best. So not every city's downtown is their jewel. Downtown Denver, got some work to do, but excited to get out to the mountains, to God's country. Heard the wildlife is outstanding. We'll catch some trout, ride some horses. So it'll be a good time. We'll still be doing the show pretty much every single day with the position breakdowns. But as far as Beck, he's old, right? So I think we got to remember this guy is 24 years old. So he's just a lot older than a lot of these people. I mean, think of yourself at 23, 24 versus 18, 19. So I just think his age is a factor when you look at it and how he carries himself in some of these situations in terms of bonding with the team. I don't think he's going to be best friends with everybody just because there's not that many people his age. Like, CJ Daniels and him, you saw them going to basketball games and stuff. CJ Daniels is old. But when you talk about, Toney, Trader, these guys are like 19 years old, right? So they're just different ages. And I think that's something you saw in in Georgia, where the people were his age, were in the pros already. So like Gunnar Stockton was closer to the age of his teammates. So of course he was living with his team, with his teammates and all that kind of stuff. And Beck is off campus because his boys are already gone, right? So I think you see the age shining through and how he carries himself, how he answers questions. One repeated thing you heard about Beck from other people were the intelligence of Beck on the field. I think that's something that you hear a lot about. Just this guy's he works on it. He's natural in terms of seeing things, and he also prepares. So that was something that I heard all off season. You see it on tape when you see how he just kind of operates, and then reinforced really by every single player that I interviewed. Before I kick it back over, one question from Trent that I want to answer. Did Ruben Bain decide not to go to media day? I thought I heard that. No, like there was no controversy or anything here. He had a prearranged situation, like good situation, like nothing bad, already for this week. This is like an off week for the players. So media is kind of right in the middle of the off week. So in Ruben Bain's case, he had plans all ahead of time, all cleared, zero non-issue. I'm only bringing it up just because I want to make sure there's no concern or people reading into things. This was totally known ahead of time that Ruben Bain was not going to be going to media day, and has zero to do with him answering questions, dealing with the media. It's just he had a prior commitment during that time period.
Mike, I'll tee this one up for you, but outside of just the on-camera interviews stuff with Carson Beck, I think we've both heard really good things from behind the scenes and how he's dealt with the media likes out there and just carrying himself in the atmosphere where, quite frankly, he's to me the biggest name that's out there this week, just in terms of
Bill Belichick's out there, and we're going to get that fireworks display on Thursday.
I think in terms of players, like the spotlight is definitely on him.
Yeah, Klubnik. I mean, we've discussed his it factor, right? And this is actually the jump off point. And thank you for the vine, Pete. Is a lot of people made their mind up about Carson Beck because they know him as the boyfriend in the TikTok videos, and they may not think that he's all about ball there. He is approaching this like a mature dude entering his mid-20s. He's approaching this as if he's getting paid a nice salary for professional work. His approach was super professional. I spoke to several people out at ACC Media Day, and Carson Beck really stuck out in terms of his preparation for ACC Media Day, his professional approach to it. Everyone came away very impressive. This is a guy that is going to be a leader in a different way. Look, I'm not going to say that how someone approaches media day is how you judge them on the balance of the season. Obviously, their play will do that. I know that Cam Ward had a shocking level of confidence about him at ACC Media Day that if you were in on Cam, you would have taken that as proof positive that this guy is going to lead a different way, but he believes in himself and he's got moxie. But if you were one of the Cam Ward skeptics, you'd be like, what is this guy talking about? He is a bit of a loose cannon in front of a microphone. Different situation with Carson Beck. He comes in a little bit of a man of mystery in that the only thing that people really know about him is he dated this one person. He's got his arm injury. He's not a super flashy type, and his teammates don't really also know much about him, but the level of maturity that he approached that entire process, the things that he said too, I really read into how he tries to develop camaraderie with his teammates, and he goes about it a different way. Sometimes you want to be a golfing buddy or a roommate to a wide receiver. Sometimes you just want to go out there on the field and work with somebody. And I think it's going to as C-Money's touched on, we all kind of have CJ Daniels as the leading receiver here. I think that age, the experience of going from one school to another that CJ Daniels has, D-Money, I think that this is a pairing that we should keep our eye on. I'm not saying Restrepo, Cam Ward, like, I think Miami's going to have a much more balanced attack this season, even though Cam Ward was pretty balanced with where he sprayed the ball. But I think if we were ever to lock in on one particular dynamic on that offense, that's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and it's a style of play as well. I always use a Kobe Young comparison. Beck last year, without Brock Bowers, without Ladd McConkey, he really focused on Colby Young in the early part of the season. They got a Clemson game, getting him one-on-one, throwing him that back shoulder. I just think he likes to throw to contested catch wide receivers. He trusts his placement. He doesn't worry as much about separation if he can place it where he wants, and the receiver has the ability to make those kind of plays away from his body using his strength. So that's CJ Daniels. I think that pairing, just from a football standpoint, makes sense. From an age standpoint, makes a lot of sense, just because, again, these are like he's the old guy in the room. And Daniels, what he's doing is he's working with the young receivers in that room and being sort of the coach on the field, bringing those guys along. We talked about it. That's something Miami didn't really have last year. The veterans were really focused on performing, and you had the performance #1 passing offense in the country. I think Daniels obviously focused on his own performance, but taking more of an active role in working with those young kids. I interviewed him for Storm Sessions. Great kid. You could tell he cares about the great young man, really. He cares about the younger players, and his dad's like a motivational speaker, former athlete. So that's sort of part of his DNA, is to invest in others. So with CJ Daniels. So I think that's not only will he help Carson Beck, he'll help the young receivers in the room. He looks good on his workout videos. I know Pete's been saying he's going to be the leading receiver. There's everybody. It's funny. You hear about CJ Daniels, you hear about JoJo Trader, you hear about Malachi Toney. Everybody's kind of got a different player that's getting hyped. If all three of those guys can meet expectations, forget the rest of the room, which Keelan Marion, other guys there in the mix, I think you're going to be in very good shape at wide receiver. Before I give the mic back, shout out to Eric, shout out to Armani at the airport. Pete, I was walking through the airport yesterday, and you and 50 were on, and my boy Armani was watching you guys while working at the MIA. So, we're worldwide out here. We're at Miami International Airport. Shout out to Eric. Shout out to Armani. Keep things running on time out there. Appreciate everything you do.
Some good things were said about Malachi by Mario Cristobal. I know Kane's insight on our socials. By all means, follow us on social media.
I'll pull that post up right now.
Yeah. And Mario Cristobal, obviously, there is one headliner on the marquee when it comes to ACC Media Day this week in the coaching ranks, and it's going to come around on Thursday. Mario Cristobal in a different position. I think last year was really big for the doubts. I mean, you had the disaster the prior year with the bad game management. Kind of put a lot of those narratives to bed. Everyone can see a sustainable business model over here, kind of overshadowed by his quarterback. And I think the main takeaway from, look, we talked to mostly Miami people out there. There was a lot of national media out there, regional media, ACC types and whatnot. I think it's pretty irrefutable who the winner of day one of ACC Media Day was, and it was Carson Beck. He didn't have a high bar to clear. I think he made it clear he's going to have a different approach to Cam Ward. The comparisons are going to be inevitable because of who he's following, but if you can read into a man's approach and how he carries himself, that's the type of attitude that you want out of someone that is stepping into those shoes. He's certainly not going to shy away from that. He had pretty big shoes to fill at Georgia, and I think that is commonly looked over when people talk about the Cam Ward to Carson Beck handoff. Is he took over for a legend at Georgia, a legend that finally had climbed the top of the mountaintop over there, a legend that hadn't graduated despite being there for 18 years seemingly. Carson Beck did that with Stetson Bennett. He's coming over here. It's a different situation. Miami is starved for a winner, but Miami is going to approach it a lot differently. And I think that Carson Beck has the right mentality going into it. You mentioned the Ruben Bain thing. I'm glad that you did. Let's hit this Malachi note before I go over to the defense, because I was really encouraged by what I heard by some of the defensive reps over there. But Mario Cristobal, he doesn't give you much, right, Pete? We guard state secrets around here, but word has gotten out about Malachi Toney from a brilliant spring that he had. This looks to be a young man that's going to make an impact from day one here. I'm excited to see him in fall camp, to see what kind of growth he's made just from the spring. What did you make of Mario Cristobal's comments on Malachi Toney?
Well, I was cracking up, and I know D, you'll get a kick out of this because it was Joe Rose who asked him the question, and Joe Rose is very plugged in locally, goes to a lot of high school games, and the way that Joe Rose prefaced it, because he knows Mario does not like to hype up these young kids. He said, "I hate to do this, coach, but my guys in Broward, they told me, to ask you about this guy, Malachi Toney." So, and of course, Mario just goes right into it. And he says he's a special talent, a special young man, awesome family, and has really made some impressive plays and has shown maturity that you don't often see from a guy his age, a guy that is going to get there early in the morning and do a ton more work on his route running, and also a guy who recognizes that he has a ton to work on. Shades of how he spoke about Ruben Bain a couple years ago. Mark Fletcher, he has always spoken like this about Elijah Lofton last year. But I think the impact we'll see Toney have will probably be more than what we saw from Lofton last year, just because of the nature of the offense and the need at that position.
I think this is what we've been saying about Toney the whole time, right? Which is it's about the off the field. And you see it here. We saw him on the field. We saw him in spring. He made a lot of plays in spring. In the spring game in particular, which was open to the public, you saw him catch 2 touchdowns. But it's really the off-the-field stuff. He says it right here. Going in there early, doing work on route running, jugs machine, watching film, learning about defenses. That's really what this guy's about. You saw him post that picture from, posted one of those like shirtless pictures to show he's been working in the weight room. This guy's all about football. He's been all about football. He's a quarterback at heart. So he has that sort of quarterback mentality at the wide receiver position. We always say on the show, when it comes to playing early, intelligence is the most important thing. And work ethic. That is what it comes down to when you talk about playing early. It's not about talent. It's not about anything other than, you got to be physically ready enough, but more importantly, it's about the mental readiness. And I think Toney has that. It's an important position in the offense, obviously, between Xavier Restrepo last year, Tank Dell leading the nation and receiving under Shannon Dawson. So there's a key position, but I think with Toney, it's the mental part and the fact that, at the slot, he's big enough for what he's going to be asked to do. He needs to get physically mature, but I think he's strong enough to do what he needs to do there, especially after what he's done in the summer. So, I would say he is the guy, as far as the freshman, who you expect to play the earliest. And the buzz I'm hearing out of UM is not just, hey, this guy can play early. It's more, this guy could be a star for us.
D-Money, you'd be so proud of me because I had a little mini staycation here over the last few days, had some work being done at the house, and I decided to stay at a hotel that was adjacent to Dadeland. So I was just steps away from the dining pavilion. And guess where I had dinner last night, D-Money? Just take a wild guess.
I mean, were you like going for the gold? Were you just trying to get by, or were you going for something that was potentially life-changing?
Restaurant night 1, all right? But night 2, I was like, I got to head over to this dining pavilion, and I got to have dinner with my family. And, it's more of a boutique concept, right? So I'm not going to get the huge Bisayne panisado that takes me 5 days to digest over at Islas. But I did get a bowl, and I got a vaca frita de pollo bowl. And man, did it hit the spot. I got all the extra fixins, D-Money. I'm so proud to have Islas as our partner here on our Wednesday shows.
How did your family enjoy? I mean, very svelte, right? Very fit family members. So, they're not going to be eating garbage. How did they enjoy the whole meal?
Oh, they loved it. Croquetas for days. Had some left over for breakfast this morning.
I love it. 7 different types, as you can see there. The tostones, I mean, that's high quality right there. The sandwiches. I saw somebody in Denver, actually, in the airport in Denver. Maybe he was coming from Miami, but he didn't look like, a local, just the way his hair was. But he was wearing a shirt that had the ingredients for the Cuban sandwich on the shirt. That's all. It was just words describing the ingredients to a Cuban sandwich. I was going to grab him and say, get on this plane, turn around, go to the Dadeland Dining Pavilion, Islas Canarias Cuban Express. So I know John Lagoon saying, shout out to the kimchi.
I didn't have kimchi this time. I kept it pretty basic, but I wanted to have a bowl. I do a lot of IFing So I needed a big hearty meal.
Wait, what's intermittent fasting? Is that what IFing is what we say?
Yeah.
What's your
I'm
timeline
dealing with like
on
a
that?
crazy return right now, and I didn't want to draw
I just
out.
sent you a tip in the private chat. Mike,
All right.
maybe when you're speaking, if you lower the volume on your computer, and then just bring it back up when you're not
Yeah,
speaking.
we'll bring it back manual.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Pete.
that should work.
All right, that should work. That's working right now.
Wait, so what's the timeline
there were a lot of elder
IF
statesmen that made this trip on the defensive side. I know Ruben Bain. Usually, he's of that star status. That if you're you take upperclassmen, but if you're gonna take an underclassman, it's gonna be a guy that most people have pegged as a first-round draft pick in Ruben Bain. High expectations for him. Didn't make the trip. You outlined exactly why. But the players that did make the trip, Kim Mesidor, Wesley Basaint, those are guys that have been around. They've had a couple different coaches. Mesidor, very well traveled. You want to talk about that mid-20s? Kim Mesidor has been around the block, and these guys were effusive in their praise of Corey Heatherman. And I also was impressed by how much they bit their tongue, because they had plenty of opportunities to take shots at Lance Guidry. They didn't, but they did underline some of the issues last year. And communication. This was something that was a problem, as we've talked about here, and we're not peeling back the curtain too much. Communication was a problem amongst the coaches when Lance Guidry was here. It trickled down to the players, and you saw plenty of communication breakdowns on the field. So I think it was really encouraging to see Basaint and Mesidor really stress Heatherman and his communicative skills. We've talked about this before. Corey Heatherman, teaching background, communication is the name of the game when you're an educator. So I think that this is super encouraging given what plagued Miami last year. I don't know if you were really all that dialed into what the defensive players were, as everybody's attention was over to Carson Beck, but that stuff was really encouraging, D-Money.
Yeah, no question. I think I want to see what it looks like here in spring, because in August, because in spring you saw the defense going against the backup quarterbacks, and it just wasn't the same look in the good on good. So I'm curious to see how this Heatherman defense looks going against a quarterback like Carson Beck. This should be one of the best, if not the best, offenses in the ACC, battling Clemson, and a very balanced offense. So in terms of how it looks, going toe to toe, I think that'll be a good look. Really, I think the people are going to love this defense most are going to be the defensive line, just because we've talked about it before, the stunting, all the movement, too much. It didn't click with the players we had. Tyler Barron, 5th-round pick, should have been a 2nd-round pick. Part of that could be, you could say it's on him, but at the same time, I don't think he was used in the proper way. Ruben Bain, you saw the tremendous drop-off with his play. I don't think injuries were the only reason for that. Talking to people, just letting those guys play in simple alignments where they're not thinking too much about where they're going to line up, how much they're going to move, just focus on beating the player in front of them, I think is the key. One name you heard a lot in these interviews from all the players, Armando Blunt. And what you hear with Armando Blunt, it's not about technique. It's not about finesse. This guy is extremely aggressive. He's extremely relentless. He runs down plays. He's physical. He's borderline dirty from what I've heard. And I say that in a positive way, because when a guy's like a maniac like this, but then they're also, the valedictorian of his high school. He ran a 4.8 when he was like a freshman as a big defensive lineman. I don't even know what he runs now, but he's fast. P was reporting he was running with the linebackers the other day. He was a state champion shot putter as a freshman, so he's got that power in his game. All told, there's a 5-star player in Armando Blunt that you keep hearing about his effort levels and physicality and IQ. So when you hear about the intangibles with a 5-star skill set, usually there's good results. So that's one that I caught numerous times in the comments. Shout out to David Lake, did a great notebook from up there. But in many comments, people were talking about Armando Blunt, and that was something I took away from these interviews.
We did a deeper dive on Heatherman's defenses. Now, some of the analytics do have some concerns. Like the rushing stats overall are very good, especially at a program in Minnesota that historically doesn't recruit well. But then we go to things like yards per attempt and game situations. Got a little dicey there, but I think we also acknowledge the fact that he doesn't have the best talent pool over at Minnesota. But in the counting stats, in the Big Ten, 9th nationally in points allowed at 16.9 per game. That is top tier conference opposition that he's going against too. 5th in total defense, 285.7 yards allowed per game, 12th in rushing defense. We can kind of parse that a little bit, read into it. Maybe that concern is mitigated. The counting numbers, though, look like, hey, with an undermanned roster, this guy still found a way to get results. Miami has certainly more talent than any of the Golden Gopher teams that he had in his past or any of his other previous stops. I know he's a Schiano guy, was over at Rutgers, and we have some of that personnel coming in here. But when you pair the talent that was very clearly wasted, and it's also not just on Guidry, too. I mean, a defensive line, a lot of those are individual battles. You highlighted a guy, Tyler Barron, and where he went in the draft. Part of the problem was he was too obsessed with where he was going to go in the draft, and he wasn't buying into the team scheme, which was hard to know, really. What do you think is going to be the single biggest thing that Corey Heatherman brings to the table here? Is it that communication? Is it making sure that everyone on the team is bought in and knows exactly what they're doing? Because one thing that really stuck out last year was these guys had no idea how to pass off a receiver to the next guy. That stuck out. That bit Miami pretty much from week 2 on.
Yeah, I would say less attention to alignment and all that movement and more attention to communication and the details of a simpler scheme. So just simplifying things, but not dumbing it down, because you want the communication and the details to be at the highest level, taking less off their minds in other ways to focus on the communication aspect, the alignment aspect, the technique aspect, all of those sort of things. That to me is going to be the biggest change. And look, what can happen in 1 year, who knows? If you look at, for example, D'Onofrio to May, and I'm just going to pull up the stats right now. So let's pick any stat. Let's say scoring defense. How about that? Let's start with something simple like scoring defense. In 2015, which was the last year under Coach D'Onofrio, Miami was 84th in scoring defense. In 2016, which was the first year under Manny, 13th. So 84th to 13th in 1 year. Now, you had very good talent that was inherited under that Golden accumulated. He actually recruited some very good defensive linemen. You think of Joe Jackson, think of who was a freshman that year but was recruited by Golden, R.J. McIntosh, Kendrick Norrell, younger guys.
Chad
Thomas, John Garvin as a I guess he came in the next year, but you had younger guys, Trent Harris. Similar this year, right? You're talking about Justin Scott. We mentioned Armando Blunt earlier. Ruben Bain is an older player as a junior in Messidor, but I mean, big time older players. Bain being a first round pick type of talent. Marquise Lightfoot, right? Malik Bryant, guys like that. These are highly rated players. Hayden Lowe. So I see similarities between 15 and 16 in terms of at least what was. And we know how the results turned out. So yes, we want it to be that kind of jump. So I don't want to be too much of like, hey, the best case scenario is what it's going to be. But if you're looking for parallels and just putting myself back in 2016, what Manny said he was going to do was simplify things, focus on details, focus on mentality, and getting a feel particularly, and avoiding some of the miscommunication, the overthinking that was going on with highly talented, highly recruited players. Similar to what you see now. I'm not saying it's going to be the same results, but I mean, we went from 80-something to 13th last year in scoring defense. Well, where were we at? Let's just pull it up here. This is only against FCS opponents. We were 70th in scoring defense, and much higher if you just isolate the ACC. Minnesota was 10th, right? The stat I look at the most on defense, opponent yards per play. So if you look at opponent yards per play, Ohio State, I'm just focusing on Power 4 teams. Ohio State, Texas, Indiana, Ole Miss, which is a super talented team, Tennessee, Penn State, SMU, surprisingly, which I think is the yards per plays down because they allowed so many plays on defense because of their pace that it just kind of went down because of that. Notre Dame, Alabama, Michigan, South Carolina, then you get to Minnesota with Heatherman. So that's the company you want to be in. I mean, those are the teams that have all the guys getting drafted, all the stars. You think about Michigan with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Alabama's got a bunch of guys going to get drafted this year. Notre Dame, we know how good their defense was. Penn State with Abdul Carter. Tennessee with their pass rushers that went on to the NFL. Ole Miss, Walter Nolan, all those guys. Indiana had a great defense. Bring a lot of those guys back. Texas and Ohio State. So again, the company that Heatherman was in last year was the right kind of company. So let's see how it goes here with Miami. But I think the fact that he's taking over a front seven that has highly recruited talent does remind me of that 15 to 16 transition.
I have a shameful admission. I like Rhett Lashlee. I know he poaches our players, and he develops them into something more over there. I mean,
I was gonna say, Mike, are you sure he wasn't the winner of Media Day for Canes fans after what he said?
Yeah, a lot of Canes fans. Well, let's dive into what he said specifically about Miami, and I thought his quotes about the SEC were a little bit more interesting because Rhett Lashlee seems like he is certainly put any doubts to bed. He took SMU to Charlotte their first year in the ACC, made it to the college football playoff. It seemed like Miami had a good one in Rhett Lashlee. But how did Rhett Lashlee further ingratiate himself to the Miami fans over there, Pete?
I am bringing up a tweet from our good friend Trenton Breeze, and the quote was, "Miami should have been in last year with a 10-2 record. No question, they were one of the top 12 teams in the country."
Now, this serves the greater purpose of trying to combat the SEC when it comes to propaganda and narrative. That's going to be impossible. You're tilting at windmills. The people that establish the narrative, largely it's 90% ESPN and then whatever Fox does with their networks. It's an SEC Big Ten nation, right? You're always going to be fighting an uphill battle there, but it's not the only shot that Rhett Lashlee, while that is lifting Miami up, we know that the intentions there are to get more ACC teams into this college football playoff. As we saw with Miami, they were fighting a losing battle when it came to fighting for their cause, because people who are just naturally predisposed to trusting the SEC brands, they went with that. We saw that play out. Bama was going to get in. They ultimately didn't, and then they ended up losing to Michigan. But D-Money, I'm curious your thoughts on what Rhett had to say about the SEC. He was actually using their top line success against them, saying, what are you talking about, this being such a difficult conference? If anything, it's a super top heavy conference. There have been like 6 teams that have won this thing since we had color television, essentially, which was a pretty interesting point. But I will say, there have been 2 ACC teams that have pretty much mattered since Miami entered. And while that's not necessarily the 1970s, we're fighting a losing battle here, but got to give Rhett Lashlee some points for trying.
Yeah, no, I got a lot of respect for Rhett Lashlee. No issues there. Dabo Swinney, I never was a big Dabo hater. He was always pumping up Miami when Miami had any kind of momentum. So I got no problem with either of those guys. I will say, if I'm an SEC fan, South Carolina is one of those teams that has not won a championship, and they beat Clemson last year. So, I wouldn't be too pleased if I was an SEC fan. I think they have probably good arguments to respond to that. What's going to be interesting with Rhett Lashlee is Arkansas, Pittman's on kind of thin ice over there. So let's say Pittman has another bad year and he's gone. Does Rhett Lashlee leave SMU for Arkansas, which would be one of those like non-top 6 type of jobs? I know they won a national championship back before that time period he's talking about, back when like Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson, but they haven't done anything really to that level since. So he's from Arkansas, Rhett Lashlee. He's from Northwest Arkansas. So does that mean that if Pittman gets fired, Rhett Lashlee says, Arkansas, hey, no, thank you. I've got a good gig here in the ACC. I'm not trying to be a mediocre SEC team. Or does he say, this is my dream job, I'm taking it? So that was one of the first things that kind of came to my mind, because if Arkansas's coach gets fired and he just has a decent season at SMU, he's going to be the number 1 candidate for that job. So these comments would definitely,
and I'm
he
sure
takes
he'll
that
be
job
compensated very nicely for that opportunity.
Right.
And I know that Arkansas tugs at the heartstrings there, but Texas Tech has a 4th-year head coach. They have spent a lot of money. That is increasingly becoming a better job. Also, let's not poo-poo SMU. They just showed they play in a conference that they just made it to the ACC championship game in their first year. They've got a lot of wealth a lot of big-time influential alumni. That is not a bad job that Rhett Lashlee presently sits on. He's presently making it a better job. I'm not saying that it's a better job than Arkansas.
No, I think it's a great job, and I think obviously it's like an NBA, like the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference. It's you want to be in the East right now, but just going off what TJ said, you see what Arkansas just did to go get John Calipari. They've got some money of their own.
Oh, no, no doubt. And I'm sure that there's a coaching carousel. Who knows what happens with Lane? Lane, I don't think is long for this college football world. He just seems kind of stuck. It's why he was so interested in Miami, even though that interest wasn't necessarily mutual there. But Rhett Lashlee, deservedly so, D-Money, a name that should be atop most of those candidate lists. Hopefully he doesn't have the same level of success that he has last year, because that would once again have Miami on the outside looking in all likelihood. At least this year, though, Miami's a pretty big game in Dallas, one of their 4 big road games.
Yeah, and SMU lost a lot of talent, right? You think of the Miami guys; those guys are all pretty much gone. You lose Brashard Smith, who was very impactful for them, although Chris Johnson, I think, is going to fill that role. Elijah Roberts, probably their biggest loss on the defensive line. Their defense was good last year. We just went through those numbers, even with the kind of the funky numbers based on their pace. But Jafari Harvey, they lose. They lose some guys. So Jared Harrison Hunt, just think of the Miami guys on their front. So we'll see what they do. They're going to have a bigger target on their back, obviously, but they've been a pretty consistent program for the last couple of years, even before they got to the ACC. So we'll see. That's a big game. We'll be out there in Dallas, Katy Trail. So that'll be a fun road game to play. I would have loved that matchup last year, just because giving Cam Ward all those extra possessions would have been tough for SMU. It's just a bad style matchup, even with our bad defense. This year could be potentially the same thing. If that's, if you talk about our defense getting a little better and our offense remaining at least a top 10 unit in the country, doesn't have to be number 1 by a mile like last year. That's the type of matchup you don't like if you're SMU, because if you have these 5-star defensive linemen, they can overwhelm your under-talented offensive line for a holding penalty, a sack, something that kills your drive, and then their offense is getting all these chances to score when they're good. That can cause a lot of problems.
So my gold medal winner from Miami's ACC Media Day was Carson Beck. There were certain things that he had to do just from an approach that I think he nailed, and he passed the test with flying colors. Silver medal, how the defensive players that went up there were talking about this defense, because that defense essentially kept Miami out of a playoff. And hell, with that offense, that defense might have stood in the way of Miami having some real success in the CFP. When you think back, if you had a defense that was, say, close to 2017, with that coupled with that quarterback and that offense, Miami could have really made noise. So last year feels like a real missed opportunity. But here's my bronze medalist. Miami's not the circus. Miami doesn't have the same kind of buzz it has, and I say this in a good way. It felt like Miami belonged. It felt like Miami finally belonged in the upper echelon of teams that are there just to take care of business at ACC Media Day, go back on the field and continue on the path to Charlotte. And that is saying a lot for a team that's been to Charlotte once, for a program that has not covered itself in glory, for a program that anytime that there is a level of buzz around it always seems to fall on its face. Right now, the expectation is, if you look at the odds, second most likely in the conference to win the ACC championship behind Clemson. They actually played SMU, who's in the mix there in terms of the favorites, so they'll control their own destiny to a degree. It is expected of this Miami team to make it to Charlotte. It wasn't even necessarily expected last year. Maybe I'm moving the goalpost a little bit. That was the hope and expectation of Miami fans. I'm not sure that was the national POV, because there were still some unknowns about Mario and whether or not the offense would work with Cam Ward. You've got enough proof of concept now. You got Mario in year 4, and I was kind of taken aback by how normal Miami's offseason has been, quite frankly, how the circus is somehow revolving around Bill Belichick and not the Miami Hurricanes. That was a nice, refreshing change of pace, D-Money.
Yeah, I think to be really a normal program, they got to get the playoff. I think, and I don't want to just jump to what we always end up saying, but he was hearing you talk, I'm thinking, man, once you make the playoff, now not only you're a normal non-circus type situation, but you are like, hey, we're one of those teams. We're going to come in here with some highly rated players wearing suits. We're going to talk about very high expectations. You're going to ask about high expectations. You're going to treat us maybe a little differently than you treat the Virginias, the Virginia Techs, all these other schools that are here. I think we're close to that. Certainly, like you said, the circus has died down. The expectations are higher. But I really hope next media day Miami comes in at just a clear different level where they're being treated not just as, a real team and not a joke, but hey, this is a real national type of program that they're going to come up and show up to the event. They'll bring their highly rated players. They'll answer some questions, but their focus is bigger than the ACC and all that kind of stuff. So Clemson's been that for a while, where it just feels different when they talk to Clemson about who they're talking to, what they're asking about, what the expectations are. I think Miami's getting close to that, but that's, to me, that was my takeaway, just hearing you say, how we're becoming more of just a real program. That's when we're officially stamped as a real program, when either we win the ACC or make the playoff. And now we can carry ourselves that way. But a good start yesterday being with the professionalism, with just the talent that was there. I mean, you talk about, Carson Beck, Malino, these are first-round type picks. So you want to send first-round picks to Charlotte. That's a good step. And I think you saw that last year, obviously.
Pete, I understand what he's doing with the playoff. There's a way to get to the playoff without necessarily getting to Charlotte. But for me, this team absolutely has to get to Charlotte. The schedule's all out there for them. They're tough games, yes, no doubt. A lot of them out of conference. They avoid Clemson on the field this year. They get to play SMU and at least have a say as to whether or not they actually go to Charlotte. We know last year was wonky inside the ACC. There were all sorts of late November scenarios in which 4 out of the 5 teams hadn't even played each other yet, with Charlotte on the line. The easiest path to that CFP is getting to Charlotte. You don't even necessarily have to win the game, but you have to show up to the damn game, Pete. And that's where my level of expectation is. I'm not going to move it back to playoff just because of what I highlighted right there. This team needs to get to Charlotte. I need to stop canceling hotel reservations in late November.
Well, especially because the 2 games that everyone's scheduling, circling on the schedule, you could lose both of those and it still won't matter to your. Obviously, you don't want that to be the case, and then then you have to win the ACC. Then you actually have to win it all. But that's what makes this so must do this year, because it might sound cliche, but it really comes down to winning those games that you haven't been able to win for years. Running the table on the Louisvilles of the world, and Florida State is not going to be as bad as last year, right? You're on the road again. So that's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a walkover win. On the road at Virginia Tech, Syracuse again. So again, I'm not, everyone talking about you should run through the ACC. I haven't seen it happen yet. So I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of narrative at play here, and the ACC, to a degree, let's just take Miami out of the equation, because Miami has a marquee matchup against Notre Dame. And if they lose that game in Notre Dame was a national finalist. They were runner-up. They had an amazing playoff run. They're supposed to keep building on that. Depending on how that game goes and how Miami looks in that game, we can even take a loss there and know that everything is out in front of us, and not necessarily have to worry about an ACC narrative. And we'll do that convenient thing where Notre Dame's success doesn't really count as the ACC success, even though they're basically an ACC team anyways, which is always strange. But let's talk about week 1 in the ACC schedule, because as a part of this media day rollout, the ACC was really touting strongest non-conference schedule in the nation. Well, let's look at week 1. Because if you want to be able to grab the narrative away from ESPN steering the nation to lazy SEC takes and big noon Saturday, pushing people over to the Big Ten because they're financially incentivized to, let's look at week 1, shall we? In the ACC, I'm going to get the popcorn out for this matchup. Friday, Georgia Tech at Boulder, Colorado. Coach Prime. The Colorado Buffaloes versus Georgia Tech, a thorn in Miami's side. We know how Georgia Tech rises to the occasion when they're an underdog. The line right now has Georgia Tech as a road favorite, a rebuilding year for Coach Prime, but week one, all the excitement there. That is a great marquee matchup. Everybody's going to be college football hungry. ACC has a great job of running out of the gates really strong. Then let's get into this terrifying Saturday that the ACC has lined up for itself. And D, I want your opinion here shortly. You have Syracuse at Tennessee, Fugel Fuan at Tennessee. Tennessee had a very interesting offseason. Tennessee, a big-time favorite, almost 2 touchdowns against Syracuse. You have Alabama at Florida State. We're going to be bringing the popcorn back out for that one, hoping that Alabama absolutely embarrasses Florida State, breaks their bodies. And then you got LSU Clemson, which is a really interesting game, night game on ABC. And you have a couple other spots where on Sunday, Virginia Tech at South Carolina, Cal in a very tricky spot. They could absolutely fall on their face late night, Saturday night at Oregon State. But a real opportunity here to send a message to the nation, and it's all in the ACC's court right now, D-Money.
Yeah, a lot of those matchups are not the matchups I would pick, right? As far as like it for ACC victories, aside from the Georgia Tech one, they're not our strongest ACC teams, and they're going against better teams, quite frankly. The Tennessee-Syracuse one's interesting. Syracuse just lost too much. They lost their quarterback, obviously. They lost receivers. They lost their running back, LaQuint Allen. They lost offensive lineman. They lost their best pass rusher. They lost 2 other better players to the portal. Went to Texas as a defensive tackle. Went to USC, I believe, as a center. So Syracuse just lost too much. Tennessee, I think, made a big mistake because the quarterback for Syracuse, Steve Angeli, Notre Dame transferred the backup. I think he should be the quarterback for Tennessee. So I think Syracuse actually has the quarterback edge there. Tennessee probably the overall talent edge. We'll see how that one plays out. I think Tennessee, if you're asking me which team I think is going to have a major step back, I think Tennessee, even though Nico really wasn't that good last year at all, and I still think he's very much overrated. The quarterback they got was a nothing last year. So I don't know why Tennessee is getting hype. They lost a lot to the draft. They lost a running back who was basically their whole offense, and Dylan Sampson. They got a lot to work on. So maybe Tennessee is vulnerable, but I just don't think Syracuse has enough. I think the ACC is going to make their statement with Miami, Notre Dame, right? Clemson, LSU. Those are really the opportunities for Miami or for the ACC to show what they can do. And quite frankly, those are the 2 teams, right, that are going to make an impression for the ACC most likely. We don't know how things turn out. Maybe someone emerges like SMU last year, but those are your best bullets, and you're going against real teams that if you win, if Clemson and Miami both win opening weekend, ACC narrative, at least at the top, is set for the rest of the year pretty much. So you got to win at least one of those. Obviously, we're hoping it's ours, but we'll see how that goes. I wanted to bring something up that was interesting that we haven't talked about yet, which is it's not official yet. There's been reporting that maybe it was premature, but it's getting that way, which is the House settlement and the NCAA lawyers reached an agreement on how to deal with NIL collectives. And basically what you have here is this whole clearinghouse where it checks that these NIL deals are fair market values. We've talked about it before. I believe this is all itself very much an antitrust violation and illegal and unlikely to withstand scrutiny by the courts. But at least until it gets overturned or if Congress does anything, this is the law of the land for right now. This clearinghouse run by Deloitte, NIL Go, which checks for the fair market value of NIL deals to make sure that the cap for revenue sharing basically is the cap, and teams can't spend above it unless it's legitimate NIL. In their words, for example, like Cam Ward doing a deal with Bose because it's good for Bose, right? So that's go ahead.
NIL Go. Deloitte is running this. The NCAA is basically outsourced enforcement and procedural things to third parties. The NCAA is just going to sit back, license things, and collect money. Even the enforcement is on the programs and the conferences themselves. This seems like, as you mentioned, antitrust. It's collusion of the highest order to cap. Basically, what they want to avoid is teams negotiating in the dark with individual talents. They want to see written offers, and they will use something that is far from objective to determine a player's value, essentially keep the players down. Capitalism for me, socialism for you. There's talk of an executive order that is going to be drawn up. I don't think the certainly we've seen it before when it comes to work stoppages. Football players, even in the pro ranks, they don't really have a leg to stand on, D, because careers are so short. They can't really afford a work stoppage tenfold when it comes to college athletics. What is the recourse here?
I mean, well, right now, so kind of bring it all to the step by step. I think ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to get challenged in the courts, the whole framework, and it's going to get overturned. But there's a timing to that. That doesn't just happen overnight. You mentioned the executive order. Really, it'll come down to Congress, and there's certain legislation in the hopper, but that's happened before to ultimately say NCAA, you have an exemption from antitrust law. Antitrust law doesn't apply to you. You can do whatever you want. Basically, you can make your own rules, and you could treat these athletes not like employees. That's what Congress. That's what NCAA would like Congress to do. That's why they got Charlie Baker, who's a political guy, former governor of Massachusetts, to try to lobby Congress to do that. That's the golden goose. That's like what would change the game for the NCAA and ensure their long-term survival in current form is if the Congress gave them that antitrust exception. That's why they want it so bad. Everything they do is pretty much geared towards that. Even the settlement, I think, is meant to just give Congress a framework that they can bless as opposed to starting from scratch. Because ultimately the settlement is just at least the stuff going forward, like the rules going forward, it's not going to last. And I think everybody knows that. But for right now, what does this mean? The story that we pulled up here from Front Office Sports. Before this clearinghouse that examines fair market value was going to treat collectives as something different. Basically saying, look, collectives, they serve no business purpose. It's all about just paying athletes. So we're not even going to treat them like every other company when it comes to determining fair market value. Effectively focusing on collectives, treating them differently, and trying to squeeze them out. Existential threat to collectives, like Canes Connection, which we'll talk about here in a second. But that's illegal as well. Ultimately, what happened is the plaintiffs' lawyers got together with the schools, and they decided that they're going to treat collectives like everybody else. So in determining whether a deal with the collective has fair market value, they'll treat the collectives just like any other company. There's no penalty because it's from a collective. So as a practical matter, what this does is it breathes new life into the collectives, because now the collectives are treated like everybody else. They can still operate. What's going to happen is once we figure out what the real market value, fair market value, I use that term loosely, but let's just say the NIL Go view on fair market value is for like a podcast appearance or a tweet or Instagram post, whatever it is that these players are doing, an autograph session. Once we figure out that fair market value, I think teams are just going to, or collectives are just going to kind of copy that across the country and say, all right, this is the value, then we're going to use that as our calculus to do X, Y, Z. And then ultimately you get more money for the player that is not subject to the cap. It allows you to go over the cap with money that's getting paid to the players. So if you're a fan of collectives, which I am, if you're a team with a great collective, which we are, this is good news, because it makes it a lot more likely that you're not going to be subject to an arbitrary cap that, number one, will penalize teams with better collectives than other teams like us. Number two, invites cheating, because for years you couldn't pay players anything, so that was like a zero cap, and SEC schools were paying players anyways, and the NCAA didn't enforce it. So you don't want that to come back either. So I think this is all very, very good news. And if you were worried about the viability of Canes Connection, you don't have to be. And if now you want to be part of it, now that you've seen some of the clarity from all the stuff that's been happening, sign up for Canes Connection. If you use promo code CIS50, go to canesconnection.com/CIS. We got a new promo code. If you see us, the promo code CIS50, when it prompts you to do a promo code, still use the same link, but when you use CIS50 promo code, you get 50% off your first month of Canes Connection monthly membership. So it used to be 20, now it's 50, and still get access to the same kind of swag, events, and then the private Zooms with me, which will be starting during practice season, the camp, because I will be giving you guys practice nuggets that I cannot say in a public forum like this. So if you want to know what's going on in practice during camp, canesconnection.com/CIS. Use promo code CIS50. You get 50% off your first month. And then you are going to be, you'll be right there with us in the trenches, supporting this team, getting us to the next level, being part of all the success that's going to come in the future. And you're going to be the only people knowing what's going on at practice, aside from the people that are already there. And then, but by the way, so just some tweet that just came out. Our buddy Kevin Clark actually just sent it to the group chat. ESPN star, future replacement for Feinbaum when he retires. And there you go. There's a tweet that just came out. Cory Booker. This is, I guess, a quote from Frank Pallone. How do you pronounce his name? This is one of your guys. Pallone?
One of your guys. One of your Italians?
You're Italian, right?
One of my Italians?
One of your Italians. He says that Cory Booker, so speaking for Cory Booker, but Democrats here, which is going to be just, forget the politics of it. This is the reality of how this thing is there you go, Pallone. The politics of how this thing works is you're going to need a little bit of bipartisan support. You're going to need some Democrats to vote for it. And that's going to be the challenge, just because of the way it's laid out is more along the lines of like labor versus companies. So basically what this guy's saying, this tweet just came out right now, or at least I just saw it right now, said that Booker's not going to support the deal. And then if it passes the House, it's dead in the Senate because of the need for 60 votes to avoid the filibuster. And this is, again, the college sports bill that's currently in the House Energy and Commerce, what's it called? Committee. So this is the legislation I talked about earlier that's trying to give NCAA an antitrust exemption to basically break antitrust law and make their own rules. It sounds like there's going to be some resistance from the Democrat side of the aisle. And look, putting the politics aside, most people hate the NCAA. In the Supreme Court, they lose unanimously, right? The guy that hit them the hardest was Kavanaugh. So I don't even see this being something that's going to have a ton of, going to have unanimous support from the Republican side. Because I think just everybody hates NCAA. Although the problem is, you have you clearly, college sports, because it's so unregulated right now, there is clearly a need for some kind of order from everybody. And this is one opportunity for order. So that can have some appeal to certain people. But ultimately, I think collective bargaining is just the way this has to end. And that's going to be fought tooth and nail by a lot of people. But I think that's the only thing that really makes sense here. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the antitrust exemption would circumvent a lot of stuff, but it sounds like that's going to face some resistance.
Well, I don't. Unfortunately, we have enough month sample to know that if there is indeed an executive order, Republicans will tend to fall in line. Hopefully the president stays out of this, because I think the best way to get to any sort of solution, which it doesn't seem like we'll have in time for the football season, the House is in recess until September. They were supposed to be in session for at least 3 more days. I don't know. Something happened where they decided to call it off early. Who knows? I'll try to read the internet. But I think if the executive order does come into play, that complicates it a little bit, because then we're looking at a more partisan situation. But ultimately, these things can get undone. It's far from, the story is far from being fully told, and we know that we don't have it perfect right now. But what is being talked about is, quite frankly, really terrifying. If you're a student athlete, really, if you're a capitalist, it should be terrifying. These players have every right to maximize their value, and they shouldn't be subjected to different rules that athletic directors and head coaches don't need to subscribe to. There isn't such a thing as a fair market when it comes to coaches. You talk to Jimmy Sexton and you kind of figure it out. And athletes, especially big name athletes, should be afforded the same opportunity.
Yeah, no, listen, when you're given an exception to violate antitrust law, the reason you get an exemption is because you're violating antitrust law. So,
like Major League Baseball.
Well, Major League Baseball is collective bargaining. So
now,
right now it does. Now, look, it could go the other way too. I personally think in Major League Baseball, the players union has too much power, and they've done things that have hurt the sport tremendously.
Fair enough.
So I would like to see that balance recalibrated a bit. But right now it's an imbalance where you just have the players with really no power, and it's not helping the product. It's crazy right now. I actually think the product's gotten better with no rules than with the rules we had before, because you have more parity. I think the playoff is a disaster, as we've talked about a million times. But as far as actually more teams being in the mix, I think that's a good thing, because you don't have Georgia and Alabama just hoarding all the players because they're buying they're moving families from Hawaii to Alabama, under the table with no one asking any questions. So I think no rules has been better than the rules we had before. But ideally, you have rules. You have better conferences. You have, the Southeastern Conference has teams from the Southeast in it. The Atlantic Coast Conference has teams from the Atlantic Coast in it. The Big Ten is the Midwest Conference. The Pacific, whatever you call it, is now having all those Western teams, where Oregon's not playing Ohio State during the season in a conference game. It was a joke. So that is, I think, it'll be better for everybody, including the product, once we get some rules under the table. And look, a cap, if it's a real cap, that's great. Like a real cap like we have in other sports, it's legit. That's why the New York Giants can't buy their way to success. It's fine. I like that you have the New York Giants not having an unfair advantage over the Kansas City Chiefs, but you got to do it. You got to do it right. And right now, we're far away from there. Let's see here.
Go ahead.
If he asked about the preseason hype video, he said, "How are you feeling about it?" Not gonna lie, the one you did for Mario's first year's Instant Classic didn't work out like I hope, but that thing was funny. I appreciate it, man. We're up in the production value this year. All right, so we're gonna be trying to take it to the next level with certain things. I think we'll go with more songs, more production. We'll get the thing rolling. I need more bad headlines. I need more bad headlines for Florida State, and Notre Dame, so I have more stuff to make fun of. I mean, we have plenty because we destroyed them so badly, each of them, the last time we played them. But I'd like more material. So hopefully, there's some kind of scandal.
Real quick, D, we had our buddy Phil here, who's a frequent listener. This is the guy that I'm listening to for pronunciations from now on. I'm going to bring this up. But congratulations! I believe this is him. Who tweeted yesterday that he was the valedictorian for the 2025 NBA class. So continue giving us your pronunciation. Give us everything you got, because this is where we struggle sometimes. Congratulations!
Shout out to P Sizzle. Congratulations! That's awesome, man. Good job on you. And if it's not you should pretend it's you, anyways.
I think it is him.
I do want to put a ribbon on that ACC discussion that we were having week 1. Yeah, I don't feel great about Syracuse at Tennessee. I certainly don't feel great about FSU hosting Alabama. But those are in windows that there are a lot of other games going on. There's other distractions. Yeah, they may be marquee in those windows, but you got other games that you're betting on. The standalone games is what I'm going to key on, pun intended, with Georgia Tech. And certainly Clemson LSU is a huge game for the CFP implications. And we've seen Brian Kelly fall on his face repeatedly week 1. He's got to look, LSU might be in on Rhett Lashlee if Brian Kelly doesn't get it together over there, because they got a ton of resources. And then you got Virginia Tech on a Sunday against South Carolina, neutral site game. And then the big closer, which could really shape the narrative if Miami is very impressive Sunday night against Notre Dame. So a lot of standalone opportunities. And let's not forget that Monday night game, TCU at the aforementioned Bill Belichick.
Yeah, no, it's going to be it's fun, man. This is going to be a great start to the college football season. They fired up about it. We'll see. I think LSU Clemson, if just of all the games, I know Ohio State plays Texas. Besides our game, that's the game I'm most interested in, because you have an LSU team that's really supplemented its roster with the portal, with recruiting, et cetera. A lot of hot seat pressure on Brian Kelly. Clemson is the other way. They're in real feel good mode right now with how they finished the season, with what they brought back. So that game's going to tell us a lot about both programs, and I think that's going to be, talk about SEC, ACC. That's the game that's going to tell us quite a bit about where those two conferences are, respectively. Also, on the Canes Connection discussion, which we just had, I want to pull up a tweet from our buddies at Canes Connection for an event that is this Saturday, at the Miami Hurricane team store. So Saturday, July 26th, mark your calendars, 3 p.m. Armando Blunt, we just talked about, rising superstar. Tony Johnson and Keelan Marion are 2 portal additions at wide receiver guys who are going to play. Ahmad Moten, great young man, really fun to be around. I interviewed him for Canes Connection, or for Storm Sessions for the University of Miami. You want to be part of this, 3 to 4 p.m. Saturday, Miami Hurricane team store. That's right there by University of Miami on US 1. Get some photos, meet some players, get some autographed gear. These are really, really great events. Great for kids, great for families, great for fans. It's not like just some giant convention center. This is very, very just personal setting. Get to really meet these kids and talk to them. Strongly recommend going out there. Johnny Lagoon will be out there Saturday, 3 to 4 p.m.
And I'm proud to announce I'm going to practice what I preach. I was waiting to see what was going to go on with the collectives and all the politics involved. But I will be signing up for Canes Connection, giving another hefty donation over there. And you know what the main selling point was is the private Zooms with D Money. I got a lot of political takes that I think that would be a more appropriate forum to fire off with D Money over there. But a massive deal, 50% going to football, 50% going to the women's basketball. Love what Coach Trish is doing. Pete,
top 5 portal class.
It's been a while since we've kicked the tires on Miami basketball. Really impressive offseason for Jay Lucas in his first year. We got the news tidbit that they're playing Florida in Jacksonville. Any cause for excitement here? I know we're getting some recruiting interest in the high school ranks. Jay Lucas hitting the trail hard. Every bit of what he was advertised so far.
Yeah, I posted last week. We've had 3 interviews posted with Trey Donaldson, Malik Renew, Ernest Ude, who are really, I think, the core trio of this team in terms of coming over from big programs and being good, productive players and leaders at their previous stops as well. So have interviews up with all 3 of those guys. A lot of excitement, Mike, about Dante Allen, a local guy who we talked about him for a few minutes the other day. Obviously, Malik Allen, his father, and a guy who led Riviera Prep to back-to-back state titles down here, and then went on to, I believe it was Montverde, his final year there, and as a top 40 recruit, but a ton of buzz about him. I think he's going to be a scorer for this Miami team, which they needed that guard spot. And just in general, we understand this is going to be a very tough, hard-nosed team defensively. And as Trenton Breeze has kind of hinted at on the boards, I wouldn't be surprised if there's another addition to this roster coming from overseas. These are sometimes tricky. It like with these other guys, Malovich and Altuntaj, although they're signed, they're still not here on campus yet. So I'm not sure about the timing of this one. I'm not sure it'll be something where he really, this guy enrolls like right before in classes are done, or if he's going to get here soon. I'm not sure yet, but potentially another addition at the guard spot. And unfortunately, no, Sergio, it's not the Bulgarian Bulldog. He is or the Bosnian Bulldog. It was. He is at Rutgers right now. So,
Bulldog, baby.
All right.
Wait, real quick before we shoot.
You know what? I have one off-topic thing that I wanted to bring up.
Wait, hold on. Before we get off topic, one more thing I want to get to before we get off topic there. Cam Ward, he's arrived. First day of training camp, man. There he is. So you're looking at your first view of Cam Ward. I know we had the all that off-season stuff. It feels like he's been in training camp the whole time, but this is the actual training camp. They are starting practice to get ready for the season. Cam Ward, obviously, quarterback 1. Will Levis hurt his shoulder. He's out for the year. No competition. He will be the starting quarterback for Tennessee, barring injury or anything catastrophic. He is out there. There you see him in action, man. It's going to be pretty fun to see the preseason and see all this. I don't know what this feels like. I'm the guy that watches, like, to see if like Joe Jackson made a tackle for the Cleveland Browns, come as a 3rd-round pick or whatever he was, 5th-round pick. So I watch all this stuff when it comes to Canes. I don't know what it's like to have the number 1 overall pick, the quarterback who touches the ball every snap as a Cane. So this is going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, man, camp has begun. and we'll be doing updates on camp. Obviously, the Miami Hurricane camp, you'll be getting all those updates. But I think we got a lot of camps to cover just from a pro side between Tennessee with Cam and Restrepo, Seattle. I'm hearing buzz that Arroyo is going to be a major part of that team. You saw Noah Fant, will he get traded or cut? He's gone. So Arroyo getting Rookie of the Year buzz from people in Seattle. I've heard.
I would slow down on that, but I'll tell you more after the show, D.
Oh, is he healthy?
He's healthy. I don't know that. I think it's going to take him a little bit to be the guy there.
So we'll see how that goes. But obviously that's what camp is for, training camp, see how these guys do. Damien Martinez is out there as well. So we'll see what's going on. But yeah, man, fired up.
And big test week 1 against the Denver Broncos. So hopefully Cam Ward can destroy some survivor pools out there. All right, let's get into some nonsense. For our song of the week, we didn't coordinate on it, but we got a tether there. But let's go with wrestler of the week first. And I've got a Miami tie to this one. I'm going with the total package, Lex Luger, as my wrestler of the week. Not Lex Luthor, even though Superman's a big hit, and I did enjoy that movie. Lex Luger did play football at the University of Miami, but is known for his Hall of Fame career, mainly in WCW. Still, do you think that this is still, even though he had a lot of success, multiple-time world champion, ironically enough, one of the few guys that Hollywood Hogan was comfortable doing a job for in WCW? I'm not really sure why. Even though he had a great Hall of Fame career, I still think that this is a case of what could have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like he's not going to get more charismatic, right, on the mic. This kind of is what he is. He was okay, but I mean, it's not like he's going to be, a different person on the mic. His in-ring is what it is. He had some stiffness. I just kind of think he was what he was, and people wanted him to be something that maybe he wasn't. Hulk Hogan, Perry says, oh, Hulk Hogan just had the muscles and all that. Hogan was one of the best sellers we've ever seen, number one. So his selling was outstanding. Probably
when he wanted to. D.
I mean, if he no-sold, it was outstanding too. He was the best no-seller of all time as well. But I think his selling for his size was as good as it gets. I think of Rhea Ripley now, we talked about her, in my opinion, she's, aside from my for wrestler of the week, I think she's the best in wrestling right now, period. Anybody, but she sells really well for being a bigger girl in the division. Hogan had that. Lex Luger didn't sell well. He just didn't have that kind of, and he didn't have the promos of Hogan. So when they try to push Lex Luger's next Hogan, I just think he didn't have certain things that were needed for that position. But former Kane, there you see him repping in the picture. He's gotten his life together. I heard he was a total jerk back in the day. Now it sounds like he's, since his tragic injury, almost paralyzed, that he's, really become a cooler dude. Although it looks like Brian had a nice interaction there with Sting and Luger in Daytona 500. But right here, Coach Jenko, body slam of Yokozuna was earth-shattering. Remember watching this on All-American Wrestling on Sunday, getting out of church. One of the greatest things ever. Really restored a lot of faith in the country at that time with that slam on the aircraft carrier. It was looking dicey with Yokozuna running over everybody.
One of the great American moments. Every 4th of July, I seek that clip out, and it does give me the patriotic feels. D-Money, what is your favorite incarnation of Lex Luger? He didn't really have, he had some failed gimmicks. He probably had a very mixed run in WWF with a failed gimmick and the Narcissist, but then the Lex Express, the patriotic gimmick, it did have traction. Famously, according to internet lore, you can find the photos of Vince McMahon kind of beta testing him with the championship belt at a house show to see what it looked like on him. You had Yokozuna wrestle both Lex Luger and Bret Hart because of the great Royal Rumble finish, which they both hit the floor at the same time. And Vince let the audience decide. The audience wasn't quite there with Lex Luger, and that could have, if he got the backing from Vince, who knows? We may be talking about him as a potential Mount Rushmore guy. He had the look. That was always his thing. And he always got put around guys that would help him be successful. I think my favorite incarnation of Lex Luger was when they trusted him in the 4 Horsemen, and he was getting the rub from Ric Flair a little bit, and then his famous return to WCW. Lex Luger, famous for always chasing the check, no matter what, including the Hall of Fame, in which we were hoping for him to have a nice in-house pop at WrestleMania, and he decided, no, I'm going to go to an autograph signing instead, which is very on brand for Lex Luger. What could have been, but still an outright legend and a Kane for life. D-Money, your guy.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Narcissus was good with the when he had the gimmick with the forearm, just because that was a cool thing with the forearm. I remember as a kid, where I was just fired up about that one. But going back, being older, seeing him in NWA is cool. It wasn't like at the time my knowledge of Lex Luger, but now going back and looking at it, those were pretty good matches. Also, when he, honestly went to WCW, man, the Torture Rack, and I'm saying went back to WCW, right, for the NWO or the Nitro era, set things on fire, going to that Nitro live in the Mall of Americas. The Torture Rack, for those of you at home, is a very simple move to do to your children. I used to do it to my friends when I was in grade school. Simple and safe move to do to your children or your friends, or whoever you can lift up over your head in this fashion. So strongly recommend the Torture Rack if you're doing a move to your loved ones.
Yeah, I co-sign. Great finisher to do to little kids.
So, all right, man. What else we got going on here?
You got your wrestler.
So my wrestler of the week. I'm looking for the picture. I had to go also with a defensive lineman who played in what's now the ACC. He actually played in the ACC, but did not go to the University of Miami, although he lives here now. That is Roman Reigns, Joe N-O-I. I always screw up. How do you pronounce it? N-O-I? How do you pronounce the last name? Anyways, this is somebody who was really a very, very good defensive tackle in the ACC, first team all ACC for Georgia Tech. While you were talking, I was like scrolling, looking for that picture of him sacking Kyle Wright, which he did up there in Atlanta when we played Georgia Tech. He was on that team with Calvin Johnson. All these guys was much bigger in terms of his weight than he is now. He slimmed down for professional wrestling, was bulked up to play defensive tackle, undersized guy, very quick. And we know what's happened since then. He's been the #1 star in professional wrestling, really since John Cena left to go to Hollywood. He took a step back, and I thought really when he took a step back, kind of handed the baton to your guy, Cody Rhodes, who I enjoy as well. Noticeable drop in the quality of the weekly programming without Roman Reigns as the world champion. It does not feel as consistently electric as it did during that 4-year run where he was the undisputed champ and everything kind of revolved around him. He came back on Monday. You see an immediate difference in the quality of the product, just the excitement level around a show when he's involved. So I give the shout out to Roman Reigns just because happy to have him back. I mentioned Rhea Ripley's the best wrestler in the world just because Roman's part-time. When Roman is full-time, he's both the best worker in the world, best timing, most believable offense, athletic as well. The little things in between the matches, the kickouts that he does on 2.99 seconds, the ability to build heat throughout the match to by the end it's nuclear. You can have your Will Ospreays, all these guys. They could put on some nice flips. If you're talking about a match that has the crowd going nuclear by the end of it, and then the fundamentals of wrestling, which is believable offense, I think the biggest loss are both Rhea and Roman. They actually look like they hurt people when they hit them. I think that's, again, the ultimate loss art, along with punches, which he's also among the best at. The timing, which goes into selling, which goes into those near falls, just the ability to be on time and not botch. I mean, how many Roman Reigns botches have there been since he came back in 2019? I can't think of very many at all in high profile matches, just straight botches, Mike. I mean, I really can't. Then you talk about
the selling. To botch when he moves so slow.
It's on purpose to get the crowd going. The near falls, the selling. He sells unbelievably for a big man, similar to Hogan in that regard. And then all the stuff in between, kind of the facial expressions, again, similar to Hogan. He's as good as anybody in that. So works the best. His mic is now caught up where he's as good as anybody on the mic. He had a great promo on Monday. Working with Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker actually needs to get to his level, I think. He was a little rough in his promo on Monday as Rick Steiner's son. So we'll see where that goes. But Roman Reigns, I had to give him his props because he's back as the wrestler of the week.
Then working with Roman is a really good thing for Braun because Roman was a really bad promo, and he didn't have a lot to work with. Vince McMahon kept trying to make him something. And then once Roman took a little bit more ownership of the character or started working with Heyman, he developed. Braun Breaker, the offense is there. I think he's going to get over just based on his move set. He looks the part, but there's something that is missing, and it's his ability to connect to the audience. And look, Roman was missing that for a very large chunk of his early career. So you can always find it. Roman's proof positive of that.
Question from Sergio about what do you think about Goldberg's last match and the wrestler himself? Last match was fine. It's kind of a bummer he got cut off in his interview afterwards. It was on NBC, so they have pretty tight timing requirements, and his interview got cut off. They should have done a better job with that, both on the WWE side. I mean, you can't just cut off a retirement interview halfway through. The wrestler himself, I think he gets too much hate. I mean, he got over legitimately and as much as anybody's ever gone over. Guy keeps himself in incredible shape. I've never seen a big man so ripped as this guy. At however, he's almost 60, man, and the guy is still in great shape. He's not afraid to take his shirt off in the ring, which a lot of people that age are. So, respect for Goldberg. Is he the best worker in the world? No, but very believable on offense, which again, I think is a lost art. Maybe it was because he was knocking people's heads off. That's why it looks so believable. But I think he clearly brought something to the table. He was not a creation. He was an organic, legendary performer at his peak.
I think he sucks. Pete, do you have a wrestler of the week?
I don't necessarily have a wrestler of the week. I have a couple random things I want to get to this week. I'll wedge in this story that I have here that is it is altercation related. I had to drop this somewhere because I thought it was too funny. I haven't even told you this, D, but last weekend I was at an establishment that I frequent, went to go watch the UFC fights on Saturday night, and an altercation started because I was talking to someone next to me, talking about the Canes, talking to someone across the bar from me about the Canes, everything positive. We're excited about the season, excited about Carson Beck. Another guy comes in and kind of like butts himself into the conversation, and he says, "Oh, that Mario's on the hot seat this year." And it's a bar. You don't know if people have been drinking. He just kind of throws the comment out there. My buddy and I'm sitting next to, kind of just look down at our phones, looking at our phones. 3 minutes later, these two people are face to face about to fight because this guy's defending the guy that we were talking to was defending Mario. He had to be escorted out of the establishment because he was going so hard for Mario. I have never seen anything like it. It was a great moment to see. I think the city is behind him, man. I think it was something that I did not expect to see that night, and it just came to me this morning. I should tell this story because it was a good moment, man. It was a really good moment.
We got to bring him on the show. You got to get his info.
And okay. Oh, this is the other part to it. And I received a message from this person who also frequents. That's the best part. This other person also frequents the establishment, and I got a message from him later that night. Effing BS. That guy is an idiot. I'm sick and tired of people talking smack about Mario. GT game was his only thing.
There we go.
So there you go.
Man. Mario's got
went
people
hard in the paint for him.
Hey, listen, bring him on the show. I want to see. I want to hear his take on the altercation. We got new segment idea, Sergio. New segment idea, story time with Pete. I know you're living a life out there.
Can I drop my other random thing that I want to talk about? That
please.
So Roy Black, the criminal defense attorney, passed away. 80 years old, passed away in Coral Gables. Rest in peace. He's a hurricane. Which I had heard before. I knew he was a cane, but I was reading up on him yesterday, and he actually, not only was he cane, he turned down an academic scholarship at Columbia University to be a swimmer on scholarship at UM. So he was an athlete at Miami, which I had no clue about.
Shout out to Roy Black, friends with Rick Ross. I remember seeing him with Rick Ross hanging around the city of Miami. But quick development here, by the way, in the SCORE Act. Yeah, exactly.
This is not true. What Canes Cats Heat 305 is saying. I'm not telling the story in in third person. But
so this is very interesting. So here we go. I'm gonna post up. This came up. I saw this. I was just looking for stuff on this. Hold on, let me pull it up on this SCORE Act, which is the legislation that we were talking about. So the attorney generals of Tennessee, New York, Ohio, DC, and Florida wrote a strongly worded letter in opposition to the SCORE Act. The SCORE Act is a misguided effort that will enshrine in federal law the arbitrary and biased authority of the NCAA at its worst. I mean, I agree totally that that's exactly what this is. And again, I think it's significant because we're talking about, New York. Okay, we expect that. DC, it's fine. Tennessee, Ohio, Florida. Not just, incredibly important college football states, but, this is not necessarily a blue-red kind of deal. There's going to be some opposition to this because, like I said, I think this is a very succinct way of saying what the problem is with the SCORE Act. It will enshrine in federal law the arbitrary and biased authority of the NCAA at its worst. It's exactly what it's going to do. If this goes through, which I don't think it will, you will have the NCAA basically empowered to be even worse than it was before, and it was horrible before. So we'll see how it plays out. I think that's an uphill battle if you're trying to change this law or make this law to change the playing field, just because you got to hit like a perfect straight. And there's going to be too many issues popping up on top of the issues that you anticipate that people just are not going to be on board with this. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch for sure.
Music?
So missing your wrestler of the week, though, Pete.
No, I said I don't have one.
I know.
Yeah.
And that was those. I love story time with Pete, and that was a great bonus to get in the wake of no wrestler of the week. But it's something that I look forward to every week.
But that's the thing is, I can't give it to you every week because then it becomes an every week thing. I can't
do
that.
Pete's got New Japan Wrestling.
That is how every week things work.
Catch up on.
D-Money, why don't you kick us off here? We didn't coordinate our song choices, but they do have a thread.
Well, I picked mine after I saw yours, so I was somewhat coordinated, which was I picked Half the World Away.
That's why they both sucked.
So I picked Half the World Away by Oasis. So for a couple reasons, I picked this. Number one, Oasis is back. I was never the biggest Oasis guy. Like that was never my number one kind of thing. But they're now touring. They did a great job at their shows, I thought. Just watching it, it sounded great. It sounded like I remember them sounding. The crowds were enormous. They were huge. The energy felt good. Again, I'm not the biggest Oasis guy, but this was an unbelievable performance by Brandon saying R.I.P. Ozzy. Yeah, I mean, we had a Black Sabbath song last week. I think you had one or 2 weeks ago. So we'll have to bring that one back and do more with Black Sabbath in honor of Ozzy Osbourne, R.I.P. But going back to Oasis, huge show. They killed it. And I wanted to, playing off your choice, which we'll get to next, this song right here. So this was definitely this was I guess this was their first breakthrough, but before their huge breakthrough with the, what's the Champagne Supernova album called? What's the Story Morning Glory? One of the biggest albums of the 90s. So this was a different one. Also a good one. This song right here, Half the World Away, according to, which was the guitar player? I know that he's on the left. What's his name? Is it Noel Liam? Noel. He said that this song was basically a ripoff of a song by Herb Alpert called This Guy's in Love with You, written by the great Burt Bacharach. In my opinion, you put him up there in the Mount Rushmore with Hank Williams as the greatest American songwriters. So Burt Bacharach made that song. You see Noel Gallagher was just like, hey, strumming along, playing it, like, hey, let me make my own song off of that. Made this song, which is a really good song, Half the World Away. And if you notice on this album cover right here to your right, this guy right here on that's that record that's leaning against the couch, that is actually a Burt Bacharach record. There you see Burt Bacharach right there. So a little nod to the great Burt Bacharach, one of my favorite artists to me, one of the elite musicians in the history of pop music, American music, you name it. He's the best. And this one right here, influenced by Burt Bacharach, not specifically written by him, but was ripped off him. And really good song. So Half the World Away by Oasis.
I was listening to that Burt Bacharach playlist that you sent me a few months ago, and coincidentally, it actually reminded me of the cover version, which is what I'm going to go with because Dionne Warwick's "Always Something There to Remind Me" was there. And I was like, you know what, I want to revisit because you and I had just recently went to a new wave concert, a great cover band. Shout out to the Ordinary Boys, and that was one of the great new wave songs. And I'm reminded, I'm like, man, that's one of the few cases where I do think the cover is better than the original, with all due respect to Dionne Warwick. Would you concede this?
No, I agree. Oh, I agree totally. It fit the mood, and it was unusual. I mean, one thing about Bacharach is he's very unusual in his chord changes, in his tempo changes. They're pop songs. They're some of the biggest pop songs of this century or last century, but they're very unusual. So a song like this, which I know you're going to break down, it's unusual in its structure a little bit. That's why I think it's so unique and lasted so long.
So Pete, throw up the graphic. It's Naked Eyes, Always Something There to Remind Me. And I think Naked Eyes, they classify as a one-hit wonder. And the one hit was influenced by the great Burt Bacharach, a Dionne Warwick cover. The liberties that they took with this song, while the bones are there, you have to kind of listen to the mono recording very closely to pick up on the notes that Naked Eyes really decided to accentuate. This, in many respects, added so many more layers to the song, which is quite simple, really. But it kind of leans into that simplicity and makes big, booming, sweeping new wave sounds, very 80s, obviously. But a real improvement on the original, unrecognizable from the original outside of the lyrical content, even though they do follow the same exact chord progression. But whether it be the White Stripes, whether it be Rick Ross, whether it be, new wave from the 1980s, or whether it be Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, Burt Bacharach really has his fingerprints on a lot of the American songbook, and a lot of there are people that live their entire life being Oasis fans and don't know the trivia tidbit that you gave. And by the way, I'm very disappointed that Oasis isn't coming close to South Florida. I do have Oasis tickets. I got them on the secondary market, which is dicey because ticket delivery doesn't happen until like a couple days before. The tickets I do have are in Toronto. I don't know if I'm actually going to make it out there to see them. But the videos from these shows are incredible. It looks like must-see tour.
Yeah, no, it looks awesome. They look to be in top form. Just kind of on your Bacharach point, which you hinted at, just where he pops up. The debut album of Kanye West, pretty big, important artist of this era. The song Slow Jams. That's Burt Bacharach. Luther Vandross, His House Is Not a Home. That's on the debut album of Kanye West. You think of Notorious B.I.G., pretty important artist in this era, or listen to the era that just passed. Think of the song Warning. That's a Bacharach sample. Isaac Hayes, Walk On By. You think of the Beatles. They covered a Bacharach song on their first album. Elvis's best album in Memphis. That was a Bacharach cover of Any Day Now. Jay-Z's debut album, Reasonable Doubt, The Look of Love, Dusty Springfield, Isaac Hayes. That sample is used on one of his songs, Can I Live, on the Reasonable Doubt, his debut album. White Stripes, their best album, Elephant. They were the song of the week last week. I just don't know what to do with myself. Bacharach songs. So you're talking about the absolute best songs or the best artists, biggest artists, their best albums, their debut albums. Bacharach finds his way on all of these. And of course, this 80s song. So I got to say, I don't think there's anybody that has as pervasive an influence on American pop music as Bacharach. Also, really, when you listen to the songs, they're just weird. They're not normal songs. They're easy listening in a way because it's so smooth, but the tempo speed up, they slow down in the middle of songs. The chords are just unusual. The melodies are unusual. It's a very unusual style of music to be so pervasive, but that's why Burt Bacharach is the GOAT. RP passed away, I believe, last year, but one of the greatest of all time.
As you mentioned, we did give Ozzy Osbourne his flowers a couple of weeks ago. I saw the entire tribute show. It's really a tremendous spectacle. I don't think people really, I certainly had no idea that the bill would be laid out the way that it was, which is here's Guns N' Roses for 30 minutes, 15-minute break. Here's Metallica for 25 minutes. Here's a super band with Steven Tyler fronting it and Tom Morello, and he's going to sound outstanding. But we gave Ozzy Osbourne a ton of his flowers because it became pretty self-evident that that was going to be Ozzy Osbourne's final act, and it was going to be poetic if Ozzy Osbourne did indeed pass shortly thereafter, which everybody mentioned. When we were talking about, hey, the monies are in the house. We were talking about Ozzy Osbourne when he was the song of the week, I believe last week, and we were kind of already writing the obit. So this actually seems, this is one of the few times that you see a rest in peace. You're made sad because of the finality of it, Dee, but we kind of expected this, and it was really cool that he got to see that outpouring of affection before he went.
And he did pretty good. I mean, considering it was his last show, I mean, he went out, not like an embarrassment. So song of the week, let's start with Sammy. Sammy, what is your favorite song this week?
Enchanted.
By who?
Taylor Swift.
All right, Jacko, what's your favorite song of the week here? We got
On
free
brand.
We're getting free breakfast down here in Denver. They're very fired up about the free breakfast. Oh, wait, hold on. Come here. Wait. So tell us, how's the free breakfast? What would you get?
I got Fruit Loops regular cereal with milk, and so I got apple juice. Wait, that's not mine.
There you go. What's your prediction for the Canes record this year? All right, we didn't get a prediction. Hold on. My oldest, he wants to get the record. Eli. So Eli went and got the Athlon Sports. He took it to camp. He predicted every single game in the magazine for every single team, all 130, right?
136.
136. So based on your scientific approach, what's the Canes record going to be this year?
16-1.
16-1. You heard
Just
it
like
first
that.
from E-Money. So anyways, everybody, your S money?
Yeah.
All right. So everybody, like and subscribe to the show.
They didn't say their favorite music.
Oh, I know. They're a little shyer than you. So tune in, like and subscribe. I will be back in studio next week. Mike, thanks for holding it down in the studio. Pete, Michaela. Oh, by the way, Michaela, who is, by the way, holding down the entire operation there in the studio. You see Pete there, but it's actually Michaela that's making it all happen. So shout out to Michaela. Solid breakfast take. Get her on the show more. Oh, Jacko, what's up? What's your song of the week? Now that you're trying to jump in,
I forgot.
you forgot. What an amazing performance there.
Dre.
Oh, it's Dr. Dre.
Yeah. You forgot about Dre.
You forgot about Dre. He did forget about Dre.
He literally forgot about Dre.
That's his favorite song of the week. By Eminem.
We'll see you next week.
See you next
Maybe
week,
all the
everybody.
Marlins.
Go
Like and
Canes.
subscribe. Go Canes.